Hello, my name is Silke Leimkühler, and today my colleague Beatriz Roldán and I are going to introduce you into the research we are conducting at the Cluster of Excellence UniSysCat, which is coordinated by the Technical University of Berlin. Our research cluster combines scientists, including senior and junior scientists, which are working at the three universities in Berlin, the University of Potsdam, the Charité, and the research institutes FHI, MPIKG, HZB, and FMP at the Berlin-Brandenburg area. And the research combines highly interdisciplinary research areas, including molecular biology, structural biology, chemistry, physics, and theory.
Under the topic Revolutionizing Catalysis, we are going to introduce our Cluster of Excellence UniSysCat. First, there's going to be an introductory lecture by our speaker, Arne Thomas. And he's going to be giving a basic introduction to the research done in this area. Then we are going to have expert talks by several scientists within the cluster. We want to give you an idea of the excellent offsprings that we have in our cluster. For example, Junior Professor Franziska Hess, also Tobias Gens and Marius Horch are going to be giving a presentation of their work. Another topic within the Berlin Science Week that we would like to contribute to is to raise awareness about gender issues in science. And in this case, we are going to have expert talks and we are going to have a debate. We have Ines Weidinger, Maria Andrea Morbinski, Professor Leimkühler and myself are going to be talking in this area, in particular what was our pathway to become a professor. And at the end, we are going to have also an interview and some discussion about our topic of research, in this case, how to go from carbon dioxide to the production that is a greenhouse to the greenhouse gas to the production of chemicals and fuels.
Yeah, so I'm a biologist, a biochemist, and our research is conducted with enzymes. Enzymes are proteins which are composed of 21 amino acids, and we are trying to use these enzymes to fix CO2 and to produce some usable fuels, what we call it, to convert them to compounds which then can be used as an energy source. This concept exists in nature already. I guess everyone knows about photosynthesis, which enables life on Earth, and photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is fixed then to produce oxygen and sugar compounds. But we are now trying to use this concept in a smaller scale and to use these enzymes then to fix CO2.
So I'm working in the electrochemical conversion of carbon dioxide to chemicals and fuels. And the idea is that both of us have the same goal. We want to take a greenhouse gas and convert it into something useful. Her approach is based on biological materials. My approach is based on inorganic materials. But we all both to do artificial photosynthesis. We both want to close the carbon cycle and be able to, so we know very well how to take hydrocarbons and fuels and burn them and to make CO2. What we need to learn now is how to take this CO2 and convert it back to something useful. In this case, in my research, we are trying to make hydrocarbons and fuels, for example, ethanol or ethylene. Ethylene is being used to make polymers, to make, for example, packaging. And ethanol is used as a source of energy.
Okay, so chemically, CO2 is quite a stable compound. It's inert, how we call it, and it requires a lot of energy input to convert it then to other compounds which we then can use as fuel. In biology, the nature has used, during evolution, has optimized systems, and so in biology, CO2 can be fixed under ambient temperature and in cells then with the usage of the energy provided by the cell and produced by the cell.
So in the case of electrochemical CO2 conversion, what we are trying to do is to use renewable energy, in this case, for example, solar energy or wind energy, as an energy source to produce electricity. To make this process actually interesting at the industrial level, we should have cheap electricity, and this has been achieved in the recent years. The whole process requires the energy, as in this case solar or wind energy, as a source. We want to go from carbon dioxide to products that are going to be of industrial value, for example, making ethanol or making hydrocarbons, and we are going to use inorganic materials. Maybe the advantage of inorganic materials versus some of the biological materials could be that they are more stable, and it's possible also to regenerate them at the industrial setting on site. And stability is one of the key problems in catalysis, selectivity and stability. But I believe that both of our projects are very complementary, because in both cases I'm trying also to learn what nature does, because nature is already doing photosynthesis for many, many years. And right now we are trying to develop catalysts that are going to be doing what the photosynthesis catalysts in nature are doing. So in electrochemical CO2 reduction, the idea is, for example, at the moment we are producing a lot of energy, electrical energy, through renewable energy. But this energy is intermittent. So you are not able to use it when it's produced. It's not always being produced as much as we need, and sometimes we have excess. If you are able to take this energy and on-site, use it for another process, in this case to drive an electrochemical process, this electricity is basically used as the energy source to convert CO2, this very stable molecule, into something useful. And the energy that we have at the moment is renewable energy. Then you can have a process that will be zero carbon process. So you can go from CO2 without producing more CO2 into something valuable.
I mean, the answer is yes, we think so, because that's why we are working on this. But it is, of course, challenging, but there are first examples already provided by nature on a biotechnology level. There are organisms which can fix CO2 to acetate without using the sunlight, so in a non-photosynthetic process. And even they can then convert the CO2 not only to acetate but also to methanol. And first companies are using this process. It's not so efficient, but I mean, in our research we are trying not to use the whole cell system. We are trying to use enzymes. We want to stabilize the enzymes and then to make them efficient, that CO2 can be fixed into other organic compounds. Yeah, so we are using enzymes which exist already in the cell, which were evolved by nature. But the enzymes we are using so far are not working in the direction of CO2 reduction, of CO2 fixation. They are doing the opposite reaction. They produce CO2 from formate. So the enzymes we are working with are called formate dehydrogenases. And in our work, we would like to engineer them in a way that they do the reverse reaction, that they do, as I said, CO2 reduction. It is working already, so enzymes exist. We are just trying to make this reaction more efficient at the moment.
CO2 is converted into methanol, for example, through a hydrogenation process. In this case, normally they are using hydrogen that is not green hydrogen, it's hydrogen, they call it blue, so it's produced based on fossil fuels. And this process is requires a lot of energy. It happens at high pressure and about 250–300 Celsius. The idea of now finding an alternative process, in this case the electrochemical conversion of CO2, so now we don't need to apply high pressure, we can do this reaction at atmospheric pressure. We can do it in water, and the only thing that we need is to have electricity. For many years, electricity was expensive, so this process was not industrially viable. But now, through the use of renewable energy, through the possibility of employing excess solar or wind energy that we will have, we are going to be able to take CO2 and convert this molecule into other high-value products, for example, making hydrocarbons such as ethylene or making fuels such as ethanol. So I think the electrochemical production of either hydrogen or going from CO2 to hydrocarbons and fuels, these are very complementary processes. It's not one or the other. It's very important that we work towards both processes. The beauty of this is that we can work in a complementary way, so you can develop the same electrochemical cells, the same electrolyzers for both processes, so all the engineering, all of this development will be the same. When you want to use hydrogen as a fuel, I think this is a very important process. My research group is also working on this, but I see this more a little bit long term. The CO2 electrochemical reduction can be done in a smaller scale and can be done on site. For example, we have a lot of industry that is already producing CO2 at the moment in a highly concentrated manner. And without changing any of their infrastructure, we could start with a small scale CO2 electrolyzers to take this concentrated CO2 on site and convert it into, for example, a fuel like ethanol or ethylene. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing electrolysis from water to hydrogen. We need to do that too, but there we might need to have a little bit more infrastructural changes. And I think if we work with both processes in parallel, we can take advantage of everything that we learn in terms of electrolyzer technology that we are developing for hydrogen economy, as well as to convert the greenhouse gas CO2 into something valuable. We can combine all of this knowledge. So I believe we need to do both, and they have very different applications. So if we can do things on site where we are producing the CO2, this is going to be marketable. And there are a number of industries in Germany that are already going towards this goal for CO2 electrochemical conversion. And I think they will be short term versus the hydrogen that we need a little bit more major infrastructural changes. I think it's very important to distinguish what will be the use of an electrolyzer when you are doing CO2 electroreduction versus when you are doing water splitting for hydrogen production. So when you are doing CO2 electroreduction, you can go directly in one step already to the particular product that you are going to use later on as a fuel. For example, you can produce already ethanol. When you are doing water splitting and you want to produce hydrogen, in many cases you are not just going to produce hydrogen for a given application. You are going to have to convert hydrogen into something else, for example, to transport it, and then you need to convert it back. So I think there are advantages and disadvantages of both technologies, and the application is completely different. So if we want to have an energy change and to change this in Europe and in Germany in particular, we really need to go towards hydrogen production electrochemically from water splitting, and this requires major infrastructural changes. In the meantime, until all of these infrastructural changes are completely accomplished, we can start already in a small scale to try to produce, at least where we have sources of CO2 concentrated, some of these fuels through the CO2 electrochemical reduction. But this process is not going to be able to accommodate the energy needs that we have. I think it's just a small step, but a very important step. And the idea that everything that we learn from this process can be later on transferred into the technology for the development of electrolyzers that are going to be used for water splitting.
The next level is maybe to go to more complex systems. So one goal in our research project is to then couple different enzymes to use hydrogen as energy source and to couple a hydrogenase with our formate dehydrogenase, or to couple a photosystem which is which is using the energy from the sunlight, and that then as an energy source for the CO2 reduction process.
A very important challenge is that in both cases we need water for the electrolyte. And a very important challenge is how to get water that is clean enough. When we are doing water splitting for hydrogen production, ideally you want to do this with water from the ocean, because this is readily available. And in many of the processes that we are working with, the main challenge is that we need to have water that will be a good electrolyte. And most of the water is too dirty to be able to be used as it is. the type of an electrochemical process has different steps. First of all, you need to have your source, in this case will be CO2, and it's very challenging to get CO2 from the atmosphere and concentrate it. It's possible to do it, but it's expensive. So the first applications that we are going to see is when we have, for example, a cement plant where we already have very large amounts of CO2 concentrated on site. We don't need to spend any energy to concentrate it, and so this is going to be our source of CO2. This is also in mills and in many of the industrial processes that we have currently. Then the second step, we need energy. And the energy here, we are working at atmospheric pressure, but we need energy in terms of electricity. So we need to be able to have access, in this case, to clean energy, renewable energy. So we need solar or wind energy. Then we need to have an electrolyzer. So the technology, the reactor, the device for the electrolysis is actually not very complex. But we know right now very well how to do this at the lab scale. But if we want to scale this up, we need to develop also this technology. So we have a problem of scaling up what we know very well how to do in the lab. So this will be the reactor. And then at the core is the catalyst. So we need to develop very active, selective catalysts that are simple to synthesize so that this will be of industrial relevance. If we need 100 steps to synthesize the catalyst, no industry is going to be able to follow this process. So we need a catalyst that is going to be made out of earth-abundant materials. We need a catalyst that is going to be simple to make. It will be low cost, and ideally you should be able to regenerate it.
Yes, so with the enzyme systems, we will try to fix the CO2 from the atmosphere to produce a compound that can be then used as a fuel and then again emit CO2 to the atmosphere. But this is a closed cycle, so we will not then produce more CO2. So in the long-term range, the global CO2 concentration will be reduced. So enzyme systems will contribute to that, but not, as I said, only in the long-term range, and it's in a closed cycle.
I think the idea that we have, we will be really happy if we can stop the very rapid increase in the Earth temperature. So we have a goal of staying below 2 degrees increase, and I think there is already very clear scientific evidence that the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere has a correlation with the increase in the temperature of our planet. So this is already a given. Now, anything that we can do to minimize this is something that scientists, we have this very important task for the next generation. There are different aspects that we can address. One aspect is we can address through trying to minimize CO2 emissions, for example, going to processes, as we mentioned before, changing the energy to sources that will be such as hydrogen, and so something that is not going to be involved fossil fuels. This is one aspect. The other aspect is we cannot stop all the industrial work that we have right now, and especially we don't need to think only about the developed countries. We need to think also about the underdeveloped countries, where you cannot say stop completely your industry and we will give you at some point a technology to make hydrogen. So given that we also have this problematic, we need to have alternatives, and the idea of on-site being able to convert the CO2 that we are producing and that we will be producing still for a number of years electrochemically into something useful that can be used also on site, I think this is a very attractive idea. I don't believe that this is going to solve our climate change problem. I believe that our solution is really going towards a hydrogen economy. But I think it's not one or the other, it's one and the other. And we need to think about short term, what we can do right now. And there are already industries doing this. They are already trying to make use of this concentrated CO2. And there are different processes. You can do it electrochemically, but you also can do it through thermal catalysis. In my group, we are working on both aspects. And at some point, there are going to be a mix of thermal catalysis processes and electrochemical processes. And ideally, it will be something that you can switch from one to the other. For example, if electricity becomes more expensive, then it may be more interesting to do a thermal catalysis process, even if you have to use more energy in terms of high pressure. And when the electricity prices are low, then you will switch to the production of a certain chemical based on an electrochemical process. And I think catalysis is at the core of everything that we have in our daily life. So if you think about most of the products that you're using daily, at some point a catalyst was used. And whether you are doing this through thermal catalysis, through electrochemistry, through biological catalysis, I think this is something that is really, really very important for the development of our society. So in the field of CO2 electron reduction, there is a very strong link now to biology. There are already a number of research groups and even industry interested in using algae, for example, as a catalyst. And so there is a lot of interest in combining also organic and inorganic systems and using also things that nature gives us as an electrocatalyst. So I believe that there is a lot of synergy between these aspects of catalysis.
I studied biology, and the other level, I mean, of women during the studies was much more than men. I think it was above 50%. But it leveled out a little bit later then. At the moment, I think at my university in Potsdam, I'm at the biochemistry and biology department. We have 40% female professors, so the university is doing a good job in hiring women.
So when I started my career in Spain, there was not a big difference between number of female studying in physics. It was 60% male, 40% female. But this changed when I moved to the US, and this has dramatically changed when I moved to Germany. So I was the only female professor in the physics department at the Ruhr University Bochum when I joined. And then when I became a director at the Free Sava Institute, I was the first female director in the history. So this is over 100 years. So it is a big change. I don't see a difference between female and male scientists in terms of, I always talk to colleagues, and it doesn't matter what type of colleague I'm talking to. But it is at times difficult to convey the idea of the younger generation that there are certain jobs that are not more male-oriented or more female-oriented. When you start talking to little girls and little boys, I think it should be very natural to become a scientist. And it shouldn't matter what gender you are if you want to become a scientist.